friends, it's Teresa. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be talking about all of my thoughts on a book that's been out for like 2 years now, and that is A Dowry of Blood by ST Gibson. This is one of my last two videos wrapping up my 2024 predictions. If you want to go ahead and see my predictions of 2024 or my 2025 predictions, I will leave a link to that down below. I think my wrap up for the 2024 predictions has a list of all the reviews that I've done as well on those, so all for your perusing delight. But let's just kind of hop into the video because, as I mentioned in my 2024 predictions wrap up, that's a mouthful. I did actually really enjoy this book and I have a lot of great things to talk about it, so let's just jump right in. But before we do that, if you have read this book, let me know in the comments down below. If you know any more like Dracula retellings or just any vampire books in general that are like gothic and just eerie and creepy and just make you question everything, recommend those to me. Or if I have somehow gotten you to watch or read this book in any way, shape, or form, let me know in the comments down below. Now we can get into it. Per my notes. It looks like a lot, but that's because it's on a phone. You know, I can only do so much in like a 4:3 screen. What A Dowry of Blood by ST Gibson is about. It is an adult gothic novel following Constanta, who is a young medieval peasant who has the chance to kind of change her life completely after a war has left her kind of bleeding on the ground. Dracula, or as he's formerly known in this book only as my husband or love or darling, whatever kind of synonym she uses, offers her immortality to become one of his brides. And now as like we're following her throughout the decades, the centuries, the millennia of her being his bride, we see him sort of start to become more controlling and become more aggressive and start to add to their little family as well. Now with her rival spouses, she's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, whether it's choosing her husband, whom the only life she's ever known, or choosing herself and her rival spouses and their safety. But trigger warnings for this, obviously, because this is a very heavy book. This does have a lot of violence in it. There is emotional, verbal, and physical abuse. There is gaslighting. There is blood and gore. Body horror is a big thing in this book as well. Obviously, it's Dracula. You can't really get out of some of the creepier elements and the gory elements that is Dracula. We have self-harm. We have depictions of depression and mania. We also have murder. Okay, but my first thoughts for this is that I had heard this as a queer Dracula with one of the wives of Dracula, or the wives of Dracula being queer together. I was super excited for that. I need to reread it because I think I gave it a pretty low rating when I first read it the first time, but I really enjoyed the kind of subtle queer tones in Dracula that I first read. I was really excited to see how much deeper we could get into the queerness of Dracula. And then all of that, the iterations of Dracula's wives were always very, very queer coded. Like, you're telling me the 3 women from Van Helsing were not also deeply romantically in love with each other, the same that they were deeply romantically in love with Dracula? I don't think so. So I was very excited to see how queer we could get with this. I've also had this book on the back burner since it released in 2022. Which is wild because I feel like I've been hearing about this book since probably like 2019. But it says the release date was 2022, so I'm going to believe that. But I've had this on the back burner since, and I've been wanting to read it. So if you are new to my channel and haven't seen one of my videos before, or my reviews before, I kind of have started doing it where I break it down segments. So it depends on like how much I really enjoyed the book or how much I really disliked the book. But I'll talk about either my most loved thing or my most hated thing, and we'll kind of go down from there. And if it's just like I didn't enjoy the book as a whole, then everything would be most hated. But I love this book. I love this book. So first off, we're going to start off with the writing of this book. Let me review my notes really quickly so I know what I'm talking about. So the writing in this book was done very beautifully. It was set in an almost epistolarian kind of secondary person. She kept referring to the husband or Dracula as you, as my husband. It's very secondary. It's never just like set specifically in her perspective. We can kind of, it's almost feeling like a letter that she's writing to Dracula, or a diary that she's writing directed to Dracula about her feelings. I could really just feel Constanta's emotion and desperation throughout the book, through the writing, because it was just her really trying to grasp what was happening around her, and it was obviously very difficult for her, and she was just really just desperate, trying to come to terms with the man she thought she fell in love with and had basically been subservient to, and the man that he actually was and who he was showing himself to be. I could really feel the love and protectiveness she had over her spouse, her fellow spouses, that she once considered to be her rivals. When the second spouse was introduced, she was very much jealous. She didn't really get a say in what happened. It was just kind of like, this is your new sister, enjoy, have fun. But we can see that over time she really did become more loving toward them. You could tell that the rivalry that she once felt for them eventually settled into a very deep and understanding love that she had for all of her her sibling spouses. I think that the author did a really good job balancing the dichotomy of emotions that Constanta was constantly having. You can almost see like the guilt she feels for having these feelings and these fears and concerns. We can almost watch her writing all of this down from behind, like you're walking up from her from a door. You can almost just like see as she's writing this down and like putting really like word to paper. You can see her like shoulders drop from her ears to actually where they're supposed to be, and kind of feel herself become more vindicated in the final decision she does make. And you can just really tell that there's a lot of emotion and a lot of like going back and forth of like, is this a good idea? Is this what I need to do? Is this what I want to do? What will happen to me otherwise? So I think it was a very, very like well balanced out kind of writing. The writing did an amazing job keeping the atmosphere and keeping you hooked. You could almost kind of like lose yourself to time with Constanta as it's happening. You don't really start to, she stops kind of noting the landmarks or the milestones of the world progressing as she kind of gets more lost in like being an immortal and realizing that all these like milestones and these changes happening are all ephemeral and it won't stay the same forever. I think also with her losing herself to her immortality and feeling that a lot of milestones are ephemeral and that things aren't going to be as permanent as she would like, it's almost as a double-edged sword. You can also tell she's losing herself to this toxic relationship. She doesn't know, we don't get a lot of indications of time, of progression. Once she's really deep in the trenches of this relationship, she's just very much like trying to live day to day and survive, which I think was a very good way of characterizing what happens in a toxic relationship. You know, you're just trying to get through the day and try to survive and not really, you know, get hurt one way or another. Moving on to the characters, which was another cornerstone that I absolutely adored about this book so much. They were some of the best parts of this book. I really fell in love with Constanta, and I could really empathize with her struggles and what she was going through. I could really just see, like in the moments as we're hearing about what Dracula's doing, the little red flags, the little alarm bells going off in her head telling her like, this isn't okay, this shouldn't be how things are happening. But she just kind of goes along with it, and you can really empathize with her because it's just like he tested her in so many ways that by the end of it, it was like kind of just how it was and how she accepted things to be. I thought Magdalena and Alexei were such a beautiful additions and balanced trio out of the spouses really well. I think that the trio is very well thought out, and I really love that there was a lot of care and thought that went into the other spouses, that Constanta wasn't just seeing them as like these other faces, but they had become a very much a part of her and a very specific part of her life as well. These three were just the stars of the book, honestly, and this polycule was well done. I didn't feel like the trio felt over-sexualized or that it was super toxic. It was just very much well balanced, and I liked that they felt very human as well. It was a nice thing to see. There was also just a really great deal, like a great amount of love between the three of them, and just like the things they would go through to protect each other and themselves was really just a testament to everything that they had been through. And Dracula was just kind of everything that I thought he would be, if I'm being honest. We don't really get his name even in the book. He is just referred to as you, or my husband, or our husband, or, you know, whatever like other kind of name she gives him, but never Dracula. She never drops his name. He's exactly who would you think he is. He's just this foreboding, kind of brooding man who's like a shadowy figure, this boogeyman that goes bump in the night. You can tell that he sees his creations as an extension of himself, as things for him to create, to mold, and destroy as he sees fit. As we learn more about I don't know if that's a spoiler. I'm not going to talk about that. You could tell that he just really just does not respect them and it shows with how easily he manipulates them and how much he just like abuses them as the book continues. I think there was a really powerful thing that ST Gibson decided to do by removing the name, by not calling him Dracula. Really just takes away a lot of his power. When you think Dracula, you think like this man, this Hulk of a man. But when you see him for just his trait, for just his actions, he's just as spineless and weak as other men in the world, if I'm being honest. And he's not at all this foreboding and scary figure that we see. He's just a man who sees people as something to play with and not actual people independent of themselves. Moving on to the final thing I'll talk about that I really love, but that is the themes of this book. There are a lot of themes in this book, if I'm being kind of honest, but the one that I was thinking of when I was doing my research before writing this review and just really trying to get into the nitty-gritty of this book, that the themes that I specifically loved and like could really just like not empathize, but like could really just feel coming off the pages were agency and independence, right? That's what I wrote. Agency and independence. Was that? Haha, sorry. Agency and identity. Close, but not close enough. Okay. I think those two themes were really strong, and specifically with the characters and the polycule, the trio. Like Constanta from the very jump doesn't have a lot of agency to begin with. There's not a lot of identity there either. When you first see her in the book, she's on the floor dying, having been like ravaged by some barbarians in her village, and she's just waiting for it to pass. When Dracula makes her, quite literally, he also gives her her name. She does not have a name before this point of the book. He gives her this name Constanta, and that kind of serves for the relationship that they have this entire time. She's very much what a lot of, I guess, like trad very trad, very conservative men would consider to be the perfect wife. Her husband is her entire world. She does not question him. She does not have a life outside of him, and she does everything in service to him. She puts up with a lot of his tendencies, like when he first introduces Magdalena to their relationship. She is basically told that she does not have a choice in the matter. She cannot leave him. She does not have a choice. She cannot leave him. She just has to live with it. And you can tell that it's very much a detriment. In the beginning, she feels like a blank piece of paper, and not in a good way. It's not so much like, oh, there's so much you can create here in this blank space. It's like, it's a blank space. Where Alexi and Magdalena had colors and lines and these beautiful pieces of work on their piece of paper, she was just blank the entire time to be able to be molded to whatever her husband needed her to be. If he needed to fold her into an origami, he would. If he needed to tear off a piece because he needed to, he would. And it never affected her because she is this blank piece of paper created solely for him. However, as the book progresses, so does she. She begins to question her husband. She begins to really find her footing. She begins to understand what it means to say no, what it means to question and ask this person in power, what it means for her to have a personality, for her to have likes, for her to see the world as it stands without him in it. You can really see that as the book progresses. You can see her like personality and her anger, and that like blank piece of paper that I mentioned starts to really just fill with colors and lines and just like start to become more vibrant. Another component of this agency and identity is Magdalena and Alexi, the second and third spouses respectively. These two are very much filled out on their pages. Magdalena loves to learn. She loves to talk to philosophers and academics, and she loves to be a free spirit who comes and goes as she pleases. Alexi is an artist. He loves to perform, and he loves to be the center of attention, and he loves to be around people. They all have really full personalities, and they thrive on being their own person and being someone who is independent and has choices and knows who they are. And you can really see them struggle with this once Dracula becomes more controlling and more, no, you are my pets. Pets do not leave the house. Pets do not do anything that the master does not allow them to do. You see Magdalena go through these moods where you just really feel like you're losing her. And you see Alexi start to lash out and just become a petulant child almost. And you can see Constanta struggling with their struggle because she's never had these moments of like needing to be by herself or needing to learn something new or needing more because she was never taught to need more. I think it's a really beautiful way of like writing the book, and I think it really comes through as she's like becoming her own person, and you get to see her in an encore of roses, and she's a completely different person. Moving on to my overall thoughts and my rating. obviously a 5 out of 5 stars. Probably a 6 out of 5 stars if I'm being kind of honest for you. I really love this book. I love the writing, I love the storytelling, I love the characters, I love the pacing, I love everything about this book was perfectly crafted and created to send a message, to pose a theme, to pose a question, something or other. And I cannot recommend this book enough. I will be recommending this book a ton because it's just so beautifully written and I loved it so very much for everything that it did. But that is it for my thoughts on A Dowry of Blood by ST Gibson. If you are interested in this book, let me know in the comments if I've convinced you to do it, to read it. If you have read this book, we'll have a nice discussion in the comments down below. But until next time, stay safe and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!